Hello there! Welcome to Skeleton Key Productions. I'm Khan Grace Kokon. Let's get into the video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about money. We're going to be talking about its history, and we're going to be answering some very important questions such as what is money, where does money come from, what happens if we print too much of it, and what's the best way of you building some more of your own money. Right, so before we do that, we're going to have to like and subscribe. If you've not done that already, I know you're watching, like and subscribe, not going anywhere. Like I said in the last video, I'm gonna keep on nagging you, gonna keep on doing it. I know that last time you didn't subscribe, I know last time you didn't like the video, I know last time you didn't comment, but I'm gonna keep on nagging you, keep on bullying you until you do it, okay? So, just gonna wait. Actually, last time I made them wait quite a bit. This time, I trust you, so like and subscribe now. So, there's also some other questions, and I'm going to posit this one to you. Yeah? Imagine if we all woke up tomorrow and decided that the coins in our pockets and a little bit of paper or plastic, depending on where you are. Imagine if we woke up tomorrow and just decided that those things were completely worthless. Why do we put value into what we call money? And why is some money different from others? Like, why is money from one country valued at something different from how it is in another country? And there's a whole heap of different questions that are tied up with money that you might not have thought of before, but we're going to look into in this video and hopefully explain some things and bust a few myths, and yeah, stay tuned. Right, so before we go any further, what we have to do is define money. Money is this: it's not value, it is an exchange of value, okay? Money is whatever we decide to put value into something, right? So if we woke up tomorrow and decided that the leaves in our garden or bits of grass, we decided, and we all decided that was the unit of exchange that we were going to buy and sell things with. Well, first of all, it would make some people very rich. But second of all, it'd be a situation where there's no reason why that couldn't be. Historically, human beings have used shells, they've used bits of clay, they've used paper, they've used gold, bronze, silver, they've used like all different types of metal. People in colonial America, so before they gained their independence, it was mandated in the state of, or in the colony then of Virginia, that everyone who had land had to grow tobacco because people would buy and sell in tobacco, right? And, so when we kind of think about money as it currently is, it's not always been like that. And it's a thing of, whatever people decide to use and decide to put that value in, that becomes the currency, okay? So if I want to buy a cow from you and you've got chickens, right? How do I know how many chickens equal one cow? And say I want to buy a stew, but all I have are cows, right? How am I supposed to know how many cows or half a cow or a third of a cow or whatever it is to buy a stew, right? This is the whole thing. So human beings have always used some sort of currency. It's been seen as, people have believed for a long time that people used to have barter systems, of economics. So people would be like, right, I'm gonna trade this for that, I'm going to trade fishes for baskets, etc. Like, now, very, very quickly, if you try and do that, for anything more than just a quick very, very quickly, that system breaks down. So actually, human beings, for as long as we'd be able to look into it, as long as people have been trading between each other, there's always been some form of money, going all the way back to ancient times, right? So money's not a new thing, and it's very, very important in terms of how we actually build any sort of economy whatsoever. And also, just because I'm a bit of a language nerd, and we're going to get into that in a future video. The origin of the word salary comes from the Latin word for salt, right? Sal. So Roman soldiers, for instance, when they were occupying Britain and many other places, right, they would be paid in salt. So this is where the term comes from of, their salt's worth in gold, or these kind of things, right? It's a thing of people used to be paid in salt because that's, if in medieval times or before medieval times, if you had meat, you'd have to put salt on it to, mask the taste of it potentially rotting, etc., etc. They didn't really have many spices, so they used to put salt in things, right? And so the word salary comes from that. So for instance, when we look at people setting up cryptocurrencies, for instance, such as Bitcoin and all the other, the only reason why they have any sort of value is because people put that value in. And that's why a few years ago, you saw the value of Bitcoin going down from a very, very low amount to all of a sudden became very, very valuable. And that's because people decided to put value in it. And in the second that it became less valuable, the prices plummeted and, it became less desirable to have that, right? It could go back up again in the same way that pounds, euros, dollars, yen, all these different currencies fluctuate over time. And that's what's known as exchange rates. So anytime you go on holiday, you'll notice obviously that, if you're getting pounds for dollars, you're getting dollars for euros, etc., the currency is worth a lot less. And all that's tied up with, that's a very, very complicated thing to explain. It's to do with imports, exports, and gold, and a whole bunch of different things go into the value of a currency. But it's essentially saying that we value this currency because it is solid, it is backed up by forces, by governments, which we can rely on. We can rely on them to pay their debts back in this, and therefore the currencies within countries, especially very powerful countries, people trust them a lot, and that's where there's a lot of value in it. If it's a currency with a weak economy, and certainly if it's a kind of cryptocurrency with no government backing up at all and no way of raising tax revenue or printing, etc., it becomes, it becomes a bit shakier. And so that's the beauty of money. It really is a very, very complicated thing. Right, so I hear some of you ask, why is money worth less over time? Why is it that if I had, £1,000 like a few years ago, it would I could buy a huge amount of stuff with that, and now I can only buy so much with it, right? Why does our money devalue over time? And that's this little thing called inflation, right? So inflation, the way to think about it is most central banks, the people who print money, they aim to have inflation rate of around about 2%. Yeah, sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, depending on the different economy, right? So the whole reason for that is because if we just had money sat in a bank, right, and we didn't spend any of it, it's a thing where if there was no inflation, that money would stay the same over time. So by having inflation, it's a thing of people know that their money is going to be worth less tomorrow than it is today. And so there's the incentive to spend that money before the value of that money kind of runs out and we're left with next to nothing, right? So that's the phenomenon of inflation. So the way to think about it is this here, right? If you're in a supermarket that just sold bottles of water, right? Or, you got water bottles coming out of your ears, right? The amount that you'd be willing to pay for one water bottle would be much less than if that was the last water bottle in a desert. So that's a very extreme example, right? But if all the other water bottles were destroyed for whatever reason, right, and you only had one water bottle left, the amount of money that you'd be willing to pay for that would be, phenomenal. It'd be whatever you value your own life at, yeah? That's how much you would pay. If you're in a desert and you're about to die, you'd pay whatever it could cost. It might even, if you had a bar of gold, if you had 10 bars of gold and you're in a desert and you know that you're not going to get any sort of help, and this is the last water bottle you can get before you get rescued, yeah, you would give that gold away for that one bottle, right? So if we think about currency in that same way, it's a thing of if the central banks, whether it's the Bank of England or Federal Reserve, etc., if they only print a certain amount of money and have a certain amount of money circulating within the economy, then it's going to be more valuable. And if they print loads and loads of money, flood the market with loads and loads of money, and then the value of that individual pound or dollar or euro or whatever ends up becoming less. Now, this is where we get into some of the different debates about economics, right? So there's a school of thought within economics at the moment, which is very linked to the kind of Keynesianism that we spoke about in previous video, and it's referred to as the modern monetary theory, right? So the idea basically is that currencies such as the US dollar, the British pound sterling, and the eurozone, the euro, and many other countries like that, they are very strong. People have a lot of faith in it, and therefore the argument goes that if people print lots of money, people will still have value in those currencies, right? So the argument being that if you print a lot, people will still pay roughly the same amount for that currency, because we know that the dollar is sound, the euro is sound, the pound is sound. Now, some of the inherent problems with that are that if too much is printed, then we end up going down the road of what is known as hyperinflation. So this is something we're going to get into. So hyperinflation can be very, very problematic within an economy, right? We see examples of this in modern day Zimbabwe, where they've had, and also in Venezuela, where they printed so much money that a loaf of bread is literally like worth like $1 trillion Zimbabwean dollars, or a trillion like Venezuelan what are they called again? Bolivars, yeah, Venezuelan bolivars. So in many of these places, people have to revert to using the US dollar, yeah, as their form of exchange, just because their own currency is so undervalued that people are struggling to buy a loaf of bread, so their whole life savings is getting completely wiped out. And that's, again, because of too much money in the money supply. So the counter to people saying about the modern monetary theory is that at a certain point, the dollar, the pound sterling, the euro, etc., these currencies could also go down that road. And if all of a sudden people didn't have faith in the dollar, for instance, then the value of the dollar would completely collapse. And that is very, very problematic, both for the US economy and for the world economy. So there's merits to it, but there's also some demerits, right? It's in the short term, it could create quite a lot of wealth, because what we see now is a lot of governments in a lot of debt. And as we alluded to in the last video about debt and the debt crisis of 2020, which you should definitely look up, by the way, a lot of the central banks are looking to increase the money supply in order to devalue the currency. And by devaluing the currency, the hope is that the amount of debt that they actually have to pay back will be less than what it otherwise would be. So if we have inflation, then if we owe £1,000 like now, in 10 years time, it will be less than that. It might be 900, or it might be 800, or might, etc., right? So that's the kind of idea. So if people wanted to very quickly pay off the debt, as happened in Weimar Germany after the war, the printing presses go print tons and tons of money to help pay off the debt, but there's consequences as with everything. And sometimes we have to weigh up the short-term gains with the long-term costs of any policy that we undertake. And you hear these arguments many times where people say, oh, we have a lot of debt to pay off, and we need to get the economy going, and etc. And so if we just print loads of this money, we can essentially build this magic money tree. So after the 2008 recession, central banks created a large amount of money to help try and pay, to bail out the banks and to try and keep the economy afloat as they saw it. And similarly, we have governments at the moment which have put a lot of money into the corona crisis bailouts, and they've printed this money to help people out and stuff, right? Now, what we have to be very careful of is that we don't end up with a repeat of what happened in the 1970s. In the 1970s, you had something called stagflation, right? This is where the economy stagnated, it didn't grow, yeah, and we had high levels of inflation. So each year, the amount of money that you would be getting paid would be worth less and less. And so people end up being an endless spiral where employers would be like, hey, employees would say to their employers, hey, we need to get paid more. Yeah, the price of rent is, the price of rent has gone up. The price of this in the shop has gone up. We need to have our wages rise to keep up with inflation, right? And people said no, and it just ended up causing a whole bunch of issues, many problems, right? So, and that took maybe a decade to actually put right again. So, if we are not careful, the lessons of history will be forgotten and they will be repeated, because, as they say, those who fail to learn from the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it, right? So that's something that we will have to be very careful about if we're going to go down this route. A lot of you might be thinking, right, so how do I basically build enough money to be recession proof, to be disaster proof, basically? Yeah, how do I go about actually accruing money in a way that's relatively stable, where I know that I'm not going to have to necessarily worry about things? Well, there's many different ways of investing money, of saving money. I'm not a financial expert. I'm not, so don't take my word as completely like gospel, but these are some of the things that I've looked into, and these are some of the practices which I myself am doing based on the advice of other things. So I'd highly recommend watching Graham Stephan. There'll be a link in the description, because his YouTube channel is really good, and it really inspired me to help create this. Also, as well, before I do that, shout out to Mohammed. So he was the Uber driver, taxi driver, right? Who one day I was trying to go to work and I was running a little bit late, and I ordered this taxi, Uber ride, and this guy, we had long conversations about all my different plans, etc. And he was like, you know what? Why don't you set up a YouTube channel? Yeah, because then that will be a really good way of you getting a platform. And yeah, so lo and behold, many months later, the pennies started to drop, and yeah, just decided to start putting up a YouTube channel. And I asked him how checked in with him, and basically said, yeah, followed your advice, took it on board, and it might have been many months after the fact, but guess what? It's up a YouTube channel now, so big shout out to him. Now, the way to think about economies is this, right? I remember when I was in school, they had a song. It's called, I can't remember what exactly the name of it was, yeah. But the basic message of it was that they said it's just like a magic penny. Hold it tight and you won't have any. Lend it, spend it, and you have so many you'll roll over the floor. Now, I kind of get where they're coming from in that, because if there's always some truth in children's nursery rhymes and stuff, right? And the thing is, if you just have money just sat in a bank, it will gain a little bit of interest, but that's probably not the best way of, it's relatively secure, but what you want to do with money is have it spaced out in many different areas, right? You want to have some investments, like stocks and shares and index funds. You want to have some money backed up in other things. You want to have it, etc. You want to have your money spread around in multiple different areas, right? And you want to be saving regularly, consistently, and with interest. The amount of money that you end up accruing over time ends up being very significant. Right, so just a quick example of this, right? So if you're able to save up £200 or dollars or euros or whatever is your currency, right? If you're able to save up, let's say for instance, £200, right? If you're able to save up £200 every single month, consistently on a 4% interest rate, this is some of the results. So after a period of 10 years, you will have a net wealth of £29,500, right? Which is, that's a decent level of income. So even if you're working a low wage job, you can very easily propel yourself into the middle classes, right? Just by saving consistently like that. If you save that same £200 a month for, I don't know, 4% interest rate for 20 years, so remember it was 29.5 before. If you do it, that's for 10 years. If you do it for 20 years, the amount of money you end up accruing is £73,500, right? So you see that the amount that you have, it's almost like tripled, right? And that's because of the beauty of what's known as compound interest. So each time you put money in, over time, the amount of money gets added to it, right? So more and more money ends up getting built over time. So you might be putting in that same £200 a month, but a little bit of interest here, a little bit of interest here, it builds and builds over the years and ends up getting to a good point. So by the time you save consistently like this for 40 years on £200 a month on 4% interest, you will have savings of £237,000, right? That's significant. Like that is, you're getting, that's almost £250,000, right? You're almost on the verge of entering into the top 1% of earners, right? So, and that's with, that £200 a month, that's easily within the means of most people. If you're able to save, if you're able to invest, like what I would suggest is have some of that money in a regular bank, right? Make sure that you have about 6 months worth of savings. So you build that up over time. It will take a few years. It's not going to happen overnight, people, right? But you build that up, and the rest of it, once you've got a safe amount, everything else, try and invest, buy stocks and shares in companies that that you can see a long-term rate of growth. You can see over the period of like 5 years, you can see that company's growing up, you understand that company, and then you've got investment funds, which are a whole bunch of companies all wrapped into one. So you put money into that, and as the economy grows, it keeps on growing, So the best way to think about how to grow your money is to, first of all, obviously, one has to work. That's the first thing. You have to work, you have to set up business, you have to do something, which is not an easy thing to do, right? There's no such thing as fast. There's fast money, but fast money comes fast and goes fast, right? If you want to actually get to a decent level of wealth where your family and you are sorted and like you're relatively safe and secure, you're going to have to think long term. Going to have to, maybe don't buy that extra copy of coffee like on the way back from work. Maybe cut back on buying 10 pairs of trainers. Maybe you only need 2. Like all these kind of things. That maybe don't spend £50 a night at a club. Maybe pre-drink beforehand and just have water or something, right? I'm not telling you how to live your life. I'm just saying that £200 a month is not outside of what most people could actually afford to do, right? It's a manageable thing. Obviously, if you've got kids, you've got other responsibilities, yada yada. I get that. There are many difficulties within life, but I'm saying if you have the means to do that, if you're working a minimum wage job and you have the ability to save £200, £300, £400, whatever it is, or the same in America, if you're able to save $100, $200, $300, $400, whatever it is, it's better than nothing, right? Having some money saved up is better than having no money saved up. Because what you don't want to do is end up in a situation where you're 50 years old or 60 years old and you're having to work all the way up to the state retirement age because you've got nothing. You've got no savings to fall back on. You don't have any money to tell people, hey, I don't want to work here. I want to leave, and do my own thing and just relax and stuff, right? If you are not consistently saving and investing over time and investing in yourself as well, educate yourself, look into different things, explore your skills, explore your all the different avenues that you have, and really utilize the time that you have. So if you enjoyed that video, and you liked my explanation about money and how it works and all the different things about it, and also gave you guys some pretty sound business and investment and savings advice there. So that's completely for free. I will be making you a lot of money, or rather you will be making yourself a lot of money by following that life advice. I know I certainly am following that life advice, and I wish that someone had told me it maybe 10 years ago, because I would be in a much better place I'm at the moment. And yeah, so all I'm asking for is like and subscribe and comment, look at my other videos, and have a great day. Bye.